Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
Another hot,
Yes.
semi-sunny, cloudy, chance of storms this afternoon. This is. Winona County could use some rain. Start the meeting with public comment. We have 2 minutes allowed for each speaker, and anybody can address the county board about any subject they would like to. And both here in the boardroom and virtually. So I will ask, is there anyone wishing to address the Winona County Board? Is there anyone wishing to address the Winona County Board? And for the last time, is there anyone wishing to address the Winona County Board? Seeing no action there, we will move on. Item 3, approval of the county board meeting minutes of May 25th, 2021.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion made by Commissioner Meyer, seconded by Commissioner Olson to approve the meeting minutes from May 25th, 2021. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, meeting minutes approved. Item number 4, acknowledge receipt of approved committee minutes. 4.1 is the Planning Commission of April 15th, 2021. And 4.2 is the Board of Adjustment, January 21, 2021.
I'll move to acknowledge 4.1 and 4.2.
Second. We have a motion by Commissioner Jacob, second by Commissioner Kavesi to acknowledge the receipt of the approved committee meeting minutes from Planning Commission, April 15th, Board of Adjustment, January 21st. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, we are approved. Consent comments and approval of the agenda. Mr. Fritz?
I have nothing to change.
Okay. Commissioner Olson?
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Commissioner Jacob?
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Meyer?
I wanted to talk about 6.2. I don't, not that I disagree with it or wouldn't
Okay,
approve it. I
for
just wanted,
discussion.
yeah, I just wanted to ask, what are all the possible choices?
Okay, so we'll take 6.2 and make that 7.0.
That's it.
Anything else?
No. I think that's
Okay,
it.
Commissioner Kavesi?
I just have one announcement at the end.
Okay. Attorney Sonneman?
I have nothing, thank you.
Okay, and I'll have just a little update from our AMC meeting yesterday. So with that, we have an amended agenda.
I'll move to approve the amended agenda.
Okay.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Jacob, seconded by Commissioner Meyer to approve the amended agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, the agenda is approved. Mr. Fritz, would you read it into the record, please?
All right. So consent business committee recommendation 6.1, approved conditional use permit for the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. 6.2 has been pulled for further discussion. 6.3, approved travel expenses and reimbursement policy 3.08 and travel for Winona County elected officials policy 3.09. 6.4, approved professional service agreement for legal assistant services. 6.5, approved LG 214 premises permit application and resolution for Winona Eagles Club. 6.6, approved renewal of liquor, beer, and 3.2 malt liquor licenses. 6.7, approved renewal of income contract for sentencing to service and state of Minnesota. 6.8, approved fiscal 2021 regional safe drinking water for private well users sub-agreement. 6.9, approved 2021 state of Minnesota boat and water safety grant agreement. 6.10, approved professional services agreement with MAC Consulting LLC for review and training for healthcare claiming. 6.11, approved or receive monthly finance and budget update for April 2021. And 6.12, confirm payment of disbursements. That concludes the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve the consent business as read.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Jacob, seconded by Commissioner Olson to approve the consent business as read. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, consent business is approved. General business then, it was 6.2, the approved performance measures resolution, and that started on page 46.
Yeah,
Yeah,
46.
46. Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you. So I am wondering, the set that we have adopted is the standard set that it looks like we have to adopt in order to get, there are some benefits for doing this?
Yeah, we get a small grant, and that's primarily the reason we do it.
Yeah, and that's fine. So we could adopt additional measures if we wanted to report them to the community.
Well, we could always have performance measures of our own. This is just a canned product based on the requirements for the grant.
Okay,
So
All
I mean,
right.
they have specific areas and specific things they ask. We send it out to the departments, they input that data, and then we present it, and then we get the grant. It was an attempt by the state, I think, to, make sure, incentivize people to do some performance measurement.
Yeah.
But the county's always open to doing any kind of performance measuring they want. Doesn't have to be part of this program. but it could
Okay.
be.
sure. All right. I'm thinking about our later conversation and recent kind of public information having to do with youth incarceration and all that sort of stuff. And even just some of the other informational things that I think folks are unaware maybe of, some of the, like how our budget works out, that we spend 2 to 1 with Health and Human Services that we do over supporting, the public safety budget, that maybe some of those might be, this might be another way to report some of those metrics to kind of help with understanding maybe better of some of the services that we provide and don't necessarily get credit for.
I think one of the things that we have a lot of reports that are in the agenda from time to time, especially in HHS has a standard monthly report you have to do that has various data. In the criminal justice system, they have different reports depending on what we're doing. But I think that some counties use their budgeting process to have some performance measures in it. They usually have how many miles of road you did, and some of those are in here too in this performance
Yeah, and
grant.
I think those are valuable.
But they, that's where you might have other statistics that you could, more like, I don't know if you want to call them performance measurements, because performance measurements, typically you have to have a benchmark.
Yep.
And then you're working against that standard to see how you did. In our case, it sounds more like, reporting, data or information on things, not necessarily setting a goal to meet. So there's a lot of ways you can approach it.
Okay.
What I'm trying to say is it really kind of depends on what you want to do. If you want to present data to the community about certain processes, then you're talking more about a report. If you want to actually measure performance against a goal that you've set as a board, that's a different animal.
Okay.
So.
Great, thanks. And that was really all. I just wanted some clarification.
Okay, all right.
Think about it.
But to go along with Commissioner Meyer's comments, I think maybe that new website we're working on might be a tool to, somebody that wants to know, more of the county business. It might be, have a section and make it more user-friendly and.
Interesting that you say that.
It's always been my
They're
hope.
not that interesting, right? Yeah.
No, actually, IT is feverishly working on the internal structure of the new website. And one of the things we did to go with that was I engaged a communication company to develop a communication strategy for the website and to go through all of our content with the departments and work on making it clearer, more concise, accurate. And in addition to that, if we wanted to do something like you mentioned, we could have them help us provide that kind of overview of whatever it is. So it may be a landing page that has some, general statistics, whatever. But we'll have that capability, and I think we'll have the resources, because the IT doesn't really do that kind of thing. And we really don't have a public information officer or any kind of communication, department. So it would be something that we need a little help with, but certainly it's something, we could look to as a potential kind of thing. I think with that communication company working with us, we'll be able to make the website a lot clearer and that information a little more available. But there's always room for improvement, so we can work on that.
Good, okay, all right.
Thanks. With that, I would move to approve, is it 7.01?
Solution,
Yeah.
okay.
Second.
All right. We have a motion by Commissioner Meyer, second by Commissioner Kavesi to approve the performance measures resolution. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, that is approved. All right, then going into general business 7.1, discuss respectful workplace policy and behavioral ground rules. And Commissioner Jacob, this was,
Well, yeah, I had asked to have this on the agenda after after the reprimand letters came out that I received, and then I found out later you received one too, Commissioner Ward. And Attorney Sonneman asked to have it delayed until you were here to speak to it as well. A lot of questions just in how really the logistics of the policy plays out, whether it was intended for elected officials and has it been used, one elected official against another elected official in the past. I know you've been here the longest, Commissioner Ward. Are you aware of it being used that way in the past?
no.
Okay. And so, it kind of feels like it could be becoming a bit of a tool for both the county attorney and other commissioners to me, it felt like a bully letter. It felt like you silence yourself. This isn't what I want you to stand for or how I want you to represent your district. That's what it felt like, Attorney Sonneman. And so I've kind of concluded that it came from you and another commissioner. So I have concerns with that. I have concerns with that I've asked multiple times in writing what it is that I did or said, and I can't get a response either from your office or from Maureen Holte in administration. Seems like if you're going to reprimand someone, that person should be able to know what it is that they did or said, so that could be addressed in the future. And whether that's against an elected or against an employee, how frustrating would that be for the employee to just say, this person's accusing you of something, you're guilty, you don't get to find out what it is that you did.
You don't even know who made the accusation.
And you don't know, yeah. And a lot of the language that comes out in our respectful workplace policy is the first thing you're supposed to do is go to that person and try to resolve the issue. And to my knowledge, none of that ever took place. Some other concerns has this really become an issue of commissioners are not to direct staff? And is that what's going on here? Normally we work collectively as a board and we decide if an issue is a problem, and then the board moves the issue forward. And just any reprimand letter against Commissioner Warren and myself certainly didn't come to this board, whether the board felt that they need to be reprimanded or not. So this is something that that's happening internally without board directive, and I don't feel like that's right. And I don't feel that it's right that there's really no downside really to the person doing the accusing. They get to remain completely anonymous, and why not make any accusation that they might want to make, because no skin off their back, right? I mean, no one's going to know if they made it. And since this letter came from you, Attorney Sonneman, to me it feels like there's really interference from you in the county board being able to just operate individually as a county board should operate. I feel like your work in this, it really suppresses the democratic process. And I don't feel good about that. I have gone back over what I've done and said, and I haven't done or said anything that I feel was inappropriate. When I guess the issues came forward with the 3 commissioners that were responsible for, quote, severely tainting the Daily Farms expansion process. And I go back to that because it was in my reprimand letter multiple times about the animal unit cap issue. So, I mean, really, the core of things, that's what this is about. if I want to talk to the community about, hey, I wasn't one of those street commissioners, I'm proud of what I did and how I acted, I should have every right to defend myself publicly, and it doesn't merit a reprimand letter from the county attorney. It's my opinion that it was your thought process that you were just going to suppress me, suppress my district, and that should not be, this should not be used as that kind of a tool. And I see, I mean, you say about liability for the county, it feels to me like what you're doing is causing the biggest liability of all. Yeah, I can see that planning commission members and board of adjustment members, or applicants, I should say, could feel like I can't get a fair treatment or fair process in Winona County because I've got the very same thing that the judge ruled against, this kind of collusion between commissioners and LSP is happening internally between commissioners and the county attorney, then trying to suppress my district. So I don't feel good about any of that, and I shouldn't be silent. So I have a lot of concerns about this entire policy and how it's being used and what it's being used for and how it's suppressing democracy playing out in Winona County and the liabilities that it's creating. So I don't know if Commissioner also wants to speak to it.
Respond to that too.
Commissioner Olson.
Sure.
So I had supported this coming forward on the premise that we talk about the policy, not about your grievance. If you want to air out your grievance, I would suggest you do it privately with the person that you feel aggrieved. But if we're going to discuss a policy on how it works and what the guidelines are for it, I'm all open to that, but I'm not going to sit here and play out your grievance with the county attorney. I don't think that's not what I supported coming forward. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay. Attorney Sonneman?
Well, I thank Commissioner Olson for saying that because this was on the agenda for what I thought also was a discussion of how does the respect for workplace policy apply to elected officials, particularly in this case, commissioners. And I did write a memo in January, which is attached to your materials, that talks about the respect for workplace as well as many other policies. And the respect for workplace policy you have adopted as a board in your ground rules. But legally, as I pointed out in my memo, you're not really accountable to it. The voters are the ones who can decide whether or not there's been a violation of any kind of policy or actions on any commissioner's part that they may disagree with, and then vote them out of office. But I think the point of my memo originally really was that we all have to act civilly toward each other to provide for democracy, and making accusations, as you've made to me this morning, Commissioner Jacob, isn't going to help anybody move forward. And the purpose of the letters that I did send to you and to Commissioner Ward were to identify to you that a complaint had been filed. And that was on the request, essentially, of the personnel department to put you on notice that there had been a complaint filed. It had nothing to do with the Daily Farm. You're the one bringing that up. And I also want to correct your interpretation of the court case. The court case, which is we're still waiting for that decision, by the way. So I feel rather uncomfortable talking about this. But that was the actions of members of the Board of Adjustment, not actions of any commissioners per se in that decision making. The Board of Adjustment members made decisions that the court then found were subject to essentially bias. And so that's why it had to be reversed. So it had nothing really to do, and I respect your opinion. I respect what you perceive as your interpretation of what happened in both the respect for workplace matter and the Daily Farm. But my job as county attorney is to represent this body, the county board, as well as the county, and to minimize where I can liability issues. And the respectful workplace, going back to the substance of what I thought we were going to talk about, is that you are not, none of you as elected officials, myself as an elected official, none of us are really accountable to the respectful workplace, but we should be. But in the end, it's the voters who are going to make a decision every election cycle, whether or not they agree or disagree with what I've done.
In my view, you are in a position of authority within the county. And I'm not aware of you sending reprimand letters to any other commissioners other than Commissioner Ward and myself, and specifically addressing the animal unit cap and basically my defense of my position politically with respect to that. Now, I understood at the last meeting, Commissioner Ward, that you said you put in one of these respectful workplace violation, and the county attorney did not process that one. So yeah, I feel like you're interfering with this process, and you're extending yourself too far into county board business. And I don't feel good. I do feel like it suppresses the democratic process, and it suppresses the intent of it seems very clear to me that it was somehow to bully or silence myself and Commissioner Ward with respect to the items that were in the complaint. And so I know, Commissioner Olson, you want to only speak about the respectful workplace policy, but this is all what played out of this respectful workplace policy, and we as a board have the power to decide how this policy is going to play out. Do we want it to be? And I asked a number of questions right off the bat about the policy itself. Is it intended to be used one commissioner against another? Shouldn't the employee or the person having the accusation, shouldn't they be able to know what it is that they've done or said that was in violation? And if they don't, I mean, that certainly seems like a policy that doesn't function very well. And I mean, it could happen to you too, not just me, right?
You're assuming it hasn't, but how would you know?
Commissioner Jacob, I think what you're assuming is that there's been no other letters sent out to anybody, but you made these letters public. So, and the point of
I operate in full transparency.
Well, there's some things that shouldn't be full transparency. There are some things that have to remain confidential. And there are protections that are built into the system for people who do make complaints because there could be retaliation against those people. So there's some real specific issues, or excuse me, rules about what can or can't be disclosed. You and Commissioner Ward chose to make those letters public.
But those letters did not have confidential on them. They were just on Winona County stationery. So from your office, normally things say
they were on Winona County stationery.
right,
yes.
with no reference
That's why
to
I'm saying that
confidentiality.
I act also at the direction of county departments. I mean, I have multiple different roles. And there was the need to disclose to each of you what had been filed. And that is made at the request of the personnel department, to also give you, that information, but also, so.
It's half information. And again, to Commissioner Olson's point, I don't want, Commissioner Jacob and I can deal with our own personal situation, but we can relate that to how this would play out for an employee. So that, in my opinion, that was half information. There were accusations made, references made, but I was never interviewed. I was never asked my side of the story. And, in a court of law, I watch enough 9 o'clock law shows that, it's a defense and an offense. And we were put on defense immediately. We never got the opportunity to rebut or see any kind of, it says in there, upon receiving a complaint, a thorough and timely investigation
And that it would be provided.
Yeah, and it is provided. Employees must also be kept informed about the status of all investigations. So, I mean, we got the, and again, if my concern is if an employee gets hit with one of these accusations, it's after the fact. It's just
You're
guilty. I mean, there is no, this country is changing. We've been based on innocent until proven guilty. But this policy, to me, the way it was implemented on us, and I assume it would be implemented on any county employee, and for the public's information, we don't have a big problem. A
I'm
problem
glad you
has
say
been
that. Yes,
created.
We don't have a big
We
problem.
don't have a big problem. This is a very minor thing, but unfortunately, the way it was approached, I think you hit a nerve, and we need to review. And it also says, you know, the results of the investigation, you know, all kinds of things in here that if I was an employee and I got accused of something, I'd be saying, what? Just like the letter I got. What? Those were public meetings that we were at. They were nothing behind the back, no secret meetings, no, you know, collusion or malfeasance or anything. I think you have to say both Commissioner Jacob and I, you know, work in the public eye. So again, there's a lot of things in the policy, and I've got the pages numbered and the things I've said that I would feel very strongly about accusing an employee without, technically, are these being followed? Investigations, are they, it seems like nobody can know what's going on until after, you know, you're just guilty and you create a document that proves guilt and there's no turning it back or no defense.
Well, and I guess.
Commissioner Olson has a-
Oh, okay.
if I could
Commissioner-
just-
oh.
Maybe Ken had it.
No, Commissioner Olson.
Well, I've served as a union president, as a union steward for a number of years. And I've been part of these processes, helping those accused through the process. So it does have a way to play out, and this isn't the way it plays out.
So can I ask, in employees that are represented by union, are they notified immediately that there's a complaint and an investigation started on them?
Normally, there's a grievance process if they feel wrongly accused.
Okay, all right. So, all right, thank you. Attorney Sonneman.
And I just wanted to make it clear, my office is nonpartisan. I do not do things for political gain, right? So you're accusing me of putting politics into this. This was merely.
I'm saying that's what I perceive.
Okay. And
I'm not
and I-
accusing you.
and I
I'm
will
saying that's how it
respect-
feels to me.
Okay, and speaking of the respectful workplace policy, I respect each of you and what you do, right? We differ, but we can agree on things and we can agree to differ. And that's how I think democracy should work, that we all respect each other's opinions, and we can agree to differ. And hopefully sometimes when we need to, work toward consensus. But your perception or your opinion puts me in a light that is totally wrong. So, I mean, I don't do things for political gain. I
The
mean,
way I feel is the way I feel.
and again, I respect that, but you're putting me on the spot to say I did this for a certain reason. No, I did this because I had an obligation as the county attorney representing the county, and also being very mindful that the county can be subject to liability. I mean, can be sued. That, you know, we have to also follow process, and process, as Commissioner Olson was mentioning about, you know, union grievances, and there's different processes for different systems. And Commissioner Ward, you talk about being, you know, innocent until proven guilty. Well, that's in a criminal court of law. There are different processes for civil things that may not necessarily be fair. I mean, or that are perceived as being unfair. So, and again, going back to the memo that I wrote in January that talked about the respectful workplace, that talked about the policies that commissioners are subject to, or any elected official for that matter, there's really a different set of, I'm not even would call it rules, but case law, legal interpretation of what applies to elected officials versus, I mean, are they employees? Well, yes, they're employees for certain things, but not for others. And that's what my memo points out. So I just ask you to read my memo again. to, to get, again, the flavor and what the law really says about this. You, though, as a body, said that you would abide by the respectful workplace policy, just as any other, well, I shouldn't say just as any other employee, because you're not just as any other employees, but when it comes down to it, again, the only people that can do something specific about whether or not there was a violation are the voters. So,
Commissioner Kavesi.
Yeah, when I look at the policy process that's outlined in our attachments, the person can make a confidential complaint, and confidential because of retaliation and other reasons. The personnel investigates that complaint. It doesn't just automatically go forward. It could be dismissed, could be adjusted, or it could go forward. If it goes forward, the person who is complained against gets a report. Well, the personnel office makes a report, and then there's a report to the aggrieved employee. Then there's a possibility of disciplinary actions. Is there anything in those policy processes that we want to amend or change? Some of it, as our attorney has pointed out, are there because of privacy laws and things like that. But if we're going to talk about the process, that's the process that's outlined here. Now, there's definitions in our attachments, of what is this kind of behavior or that kind of behavior. We can also look at those, but those are the two areas I think we need to focus on if we're going to discuss this properly.
Commissioner Jacob.
Well, in that, it does not speak to one commissioner against making a complaint against another commissioner. That's not in there. And my frustration was that the county attorney, in her reprimand letter to me, goes specifically back into the animal unit cap multiple times. And then when you make a complaint, it doesn't get processed. So I don't understand. I mean, it feels to me like it's some type of internal weapon, and it's childish, and it's got no place within the county board. I do everything here at this table, and I know you've suggested, Commissioner Olson, that this is out of line, but to me it's not. I'm not working in the shadows. What I do happens here.
Commissioner Kavesi.
It sounds like you want more information on the investigation process. So perhaps we could
no.
look, excuse me.
Well, you said you're telling me what I thought.
I'm telling you what I thought you thought.
Well,
Okay.
I'm saying no.
You're complaining about the investigation. Some of them go forward, some of them do not. Those are your words. So perhaps we could look at that. The other thing is, it's not one commissioner against another. Anyone can make a complaint, especially if they feel that the workplace is not respectful. I could feel that, an employee could feel that, anyone could feel that because of these definitions and because of the interactions, that the workplace is not respectful. It's not one person against another.
Commissioner Meyer.
Yeah. So I appreciate Commissioner Olson's comments about, I guess, complaints about specific other commissioners. And I am really only interested in talking about the policy. And I think that the part of our policy is rooted in law, which is to say we have to comply with certain federal laws that have to do with discrimination. I'm assuming that we've all been to the training about this policy. I have been a few times, and they talk about the law versus the policy when they do that training. So I think there are possibly things in the current situation that are rooted in law and authorities granted by state law to our HR and probably to the county attorney, that I'm not sure. So I don't know how much can be done about those. I was reading the AMC newsletter, this past month, and it has an article in there which is relevant to really this particular topic that talks about how partisanship, polarization, and rancor hurts us, hurts our communities, and how important civility is. And so they say that they have some codes of conduct for local boards, committees, and commissions, and the policies are available on the AMC website. So I think the part of our respectful workplace policy that's rooted in law, I don't know that we have control over that. And I think the parts of law that the county attorney has brought forth that we are not exactly employees because the county cannot fire us for any misconduct. Only the voters can do that. I don't think we can escape those things. That's just, how the world works. The reason that I brought this policy up back in January to try and talk about was those very concerns. And the reason I asked all of us at that time to make a commitment to try and raise the level of civility by following the policy. So if I was going to make any appeal right now, that would be what it is to everyone sitting here, is that we think about those simple rules. I think you talked about childishness. And last time that we talked about this, I talked about things that my grandma taught me. She taught me the golden rule. Do unto others only as you would want them to do unto you. And sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. And so, yes, some things that I didn't appreciate have been said about me recently. Interviews have been given to the press. I am not going to let those things define me. So if there are some specific procedural changes that you want to make, what are they? Otherwise, I think that the taxpayers of the county would prefer that we move on to the rest of their business.
Mr. Jacob.
Well, and where I was going before Commissioner Kavesi changed my wording was that, and I ask you this right away, has this ever been used internally with one commissioner against another? And is that ever the intent of the policy? And that's the part of the policy that I'd like to address. I don't think that's it feels like, and I understand I'm on the short end of a 3-2 board, and but it certainly feels like one commissioner made a appeal over an issue that was brought up multiple times with the animal unit cap issue to the county attorney, and she took that on. But another commissioner made an appeal to the county attorney, and the county attorney said no. So how can that? If I were a judge looking for something to dredge up, I'd be all over those emails. And so, I think we need to discuss what the policy is intended for and whether commissioners should be. It's consumed a lot of the county attorney's time here.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
Yeah. So
Commissioner Meyer.
are you saying that you want the respectful workplace policy to apply to commissioners as well, but that you don't want commissioners to be able to make harassment claims? Is that specifically what you're asking for?
I'm asking what it was originally intended for, because I've never heard of it being used this way. I mean,
I don't legally, perhaps
prior
we
to you
can't.
being seated, it never happened.
Perhaps we can't legally make that change. I don't know that that's true.
Okay.
Commissioner Kavesi.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point of clarification since my name was mentioned rather inaccurately. I'm not changing anybody's words. Your tactic when you talked to our attorney, you said, this is what I think you told me. That's what I said back to you. I said what I thought you said. It sounded to me like you wanted to know more about the investigation process. I was trying to get to the point where if there's something in the policy or the process that we want to change, we should look at it if we can, because some of it is bound by law. So that was my point. I was trying to pick out something that perhaps we could look at if that was what your problem was.
Yeah. So
Excuse me.
the two things that I started with are still the two, the same things that I feel needs to be addressed. Anyone, whether it's elected or non-elected, it seems like they should have the right to know what it is that they did or said. And how are they supposed to correct it if they don't? And it seems like it's far too empowering for the accuser, and there's no downside. I mean, they might as well do whatever, say whatever they want, because it's not coming back to them. And I don't care whether that's an employee or a commissioner. And then lastly, I just had never heard of this being used internally with one commissioner against another. And it, you know, it has been, I sense, and it seems like the county attorney is non-biased, or what do you say, non-partisan position, but only takes it on from some commissioners and not from others. So, I mean, that all seems broken to me, all those things.
Commissioner Meyer.
2 points or 3? So the 2 points.
That's
You
3.
want to explore, okay, so the first one was that you want to explore the question of whether the accuser can always be given the information. Right? That's the first question to explore, whether that's legal or not. I think
Yeah.
that there's a state statute that gives some authority to,
You
Okay,
mean
what's
the
the-
accused, not
Ye-
the accuser.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the third one then was that you would potentially change the policy so that commissioners can't file harassment claims against one another. So what's the third thing? The second thing, which I missed, that was the third thing.
No, I think you
So
got it.
it's 2, okay. I got confused. sorry.
Yeah, well, I think I'd incorporated into that just that it's just taken on as though that person is guilty. They don't get to defend themselves. They don't get to know what it is they did. We're just going to move forward with reprimanding them, or
Yeah, I think we've heard that already isn't how it works. That the policy already says that's not how, that's not the policy.
Well,
well, I've heard from others internally, that's exactly what happened to them.
if we look at page, it's titled Respectful Workplace Policy Process on page 147 and 148 and yeah, 147. To me, right there, and I think this is a relatively new piece to information. I might be wrong, but actually number 4 is, and here we're saying electeds going to be held to this policy. So we got number 4, complaints involving elected officials. And if you read down the A through G, it's review, determine, evaluate, draft, provide, and close out complaint. But nowhere in there does it say that both parties are, involved. But then you go to employee or the variations, and it says, A through I, the variations on 6. Interview subject, interview witnesses, meet and inform subject of complaint of the outcome. So again, unfortunately, having to just go back to my personal experience is that a lot of those things seem to have happened without my knowledge. And again, would that, according to Commissioner Olson, if you're union represented, you have a different standard and representation and information than you do as a non-union, elected, or we have some other non-union people. So what is it? Where? And I guess part of my angst is, yes, I did file something, and it said it didn't rise to the level. But what I was accused of, I found difficult to rise to the level, and not knowing that there was any results of any investigation. Now it says in some of it we do investigation, some of it seems, and I read it through a different lens, it seems like number 4 is different for electeds, and we have attorney, we have auditor, treasurer, we have recorder,
Sure.
but then we also have department heads, administration, some personnel people. How would they be handled? Where do they fall under this? And it seems like there's a different standard for different groups of employees. And then when you go back to, so clarity there, and I just feel that that's a little, that document is a little different than I had seen prior to this coming to the board. And then if we go back to the behavioral ground rules on page 141, do we ask, that's something that was put into place. Now, is that just a county board behavioral ground rules document, or is that
No, the
all our
the behavioral
employees?
ground rules were adopted by the board years ago.
Yes, many
When the
years ago.
respectful workplace policy was put in place, it adopted the respectful workplace policy and
And-
incorporated the ground rules.
Ground rules.
So they're now both related and adopted by the board.
Okay,
It's the same
okay.
thing.
And it seems,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
The
Well-
other question you brought up though was why are different ones different? It's because they are different. Elected officials there are different laws that apply to elected officials in different situations. So in terms of a complaint, we don't do the same kind of investigation we would do for an employee, because as the county attorney pointed out, in the end, we don't have any authority over the county board. So all we can do is pass on the information and say, there's been a complaint filed and you need to be aware of it. Just like we would do if we thought there was some other liability that the county board might encounter by various actions. The county attorney might send a note saying, hey, be careful of this, we're in litigation or whatever. So there's different relationships, and that's one of the problems I see in the policy. You've got the county board as employer. Okay, so employee to employer is one kind of relationship. For instance, if you were to harass an employee or to make it a hostile work environment for the employee, they would have recourse legally to go against the county board of that commissioner and make it a complaint. So that's a little different. You have elected official to elected official, which is kind of the one that I think is problematic, because it when you try to fit it in with all these other things about the investigation and all that kind of stuff, you end up having a problem with it, because you're not the same. There's a difference between employee to employee and what we can provide. There's been a mention on the state statute regarding what's confidential and what isn't. It does give some leeway for employees, because it talks about employees, not elected officials,
Right.
employees, and that you can provide certain information to them. But if you fear retaliation or continued harassment, then you can limit the amount of information they get. The county's position in personnel has been to limit that information because it limits the potential. We don't know if someone's going to harass someone. We don't know if there's going to be retaliation. So to be on the safe side, we have to say, okay, we'll give you limited information about the complaint or the complainant. That's an employee to employee kind of relationship. So I think one of the problems is that the policy is something that aspirationally everyone should try to meet. We should all try to be civil. We should try to meet the ground rules. We should try to meet that. In the cases of employees, there's legal foundations behind that. And there's issues like Greg mentioned, sometimes the contracts fit into that too, in that grievance process. For elected to elected, it's different. It's more of an advisory issue. There's a notice that's provided saying, hey, somebody's complaining about something. So I think that, in my opinion, is the part with elected officials to elected officials, to me, should be something that's more in the public venue. It shouldn't be complaints going through the system and not knowing and all that kind of stuff, because it causes problems. And they don't have the same, the elected officials don't really have the same, they're not the same group as employees or employer to employee or that kind of thing. So the new document that you saw there, that's just HR's reflection of what we're doing now. That's how we handle things now. So, there is a tie into the process that's outlined in the policy.
Madam
But-
Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Meyer.
So thinking back to the training, and of course
Yeah.
right, I didn't attend it this year. So thinking back to the training, the person that was doing the training made this big distinction between protected classes at the federal level versus policy. So I don't know if harassment I don't really know what not to talk about this specifically, but talk about this in more general terms. If a commissioner made racial slurs or gender slurs, or used those in a harassing manner with another commissioner, that would be breaking the law, right? Based on the protected classes.
Depends, because it depends on which it depends on what they are, what class you're in, what law I mean, there's so much to that. But I think you're right about the fact is that's in a civil arena. Or could be, if it's a hate crime, it could be a criminal arena. But it also, if you know, I mean, and Karen could probably weigh in on this much better than I could, but public officials are not subject to the same, liability and slander standards that a regular person
Private
might be.
people.
Yeah, so it kind of depends on what the harassment is, somebody could say something and you could find it very distasteful and uncivil, but it might not violate the law because you're a public official.
There's also, if I could just interject, sorry, there's also federal protections, particularly with bias and
Yeah.
racial things.
Yeah, so if you make, so that kind of protection is because it's a protected class. So like we make a racial slur, but that would be a civil or a criminal, depending on the situation, violation. It wouldn't have anything to do with the county's policy or administration trying to enforce something or.
And I guess my inquiry really had to do with a blanket statement of saying that these laws don't apply to county commissioners or commissioner to commissioner. I don't know that that legally is possible.
I think, well, Karen would.
Which is sort of what I think you're
And
asserting.
this is where I think, we're getting into a huge discussion here that there's a lot of details, there's a lot of complexities with it. And I think, but the broader things are really, me, and I think Ken's made some good comments about this, that, and I hadn't seen this respectful workplace policy process, which is attached to your materials before, which is good though, because it summarizes, here's the process. And as it, from my vantage point too, again, I need to clear the record. I did not take the initiative to write those letters to Commissioner Ward and Commissioner Jacob. Those were, again, through the process coming from the personnel department. And as county attorney, I have the obligation to protect the county from exposure to liability. And as you can see, working in tandem with,
Right.
with the personnel and administration to address things or to, but again, I think we're getting into some real details here that go far and above what I think anybody anticipated the discussion here. And in some ways, it should really go back to personnel and administration, probably with.
I'm sorry, and I'm
No, go ahead,
interrupt, but I
sorry.
wanted, on that one feature you mentioned, the reason that there's not the investigation and so forth in the elected official one is because personnel is not, we're not putting them in a position of trying to figure out who's right and wrong. They're just saying, hey, there's been a complaint. They look and see if it meets the respectful workplace criteria. And if it does, they basically say to the county attorney's office, hey, we got a complaint for an elected official. The county attorney's office provides an advisory letter.
Is that one, part of what I have angst, is that one person's interpretation, or do we have a team that looks at these things? Because there's a lot of interpretation going on here.
Personnel usually works with the county attorney's office to make sure that the complaint is something that matches the respectful workplace criteria.
So you didn't answer the question. Is it one person?
Well, no, it would be, in that case, personnel, well, it's two. I mean,
Two, okay.
personnel director and,
Departments.
yeah.
Well, I think when you put it in writing, that hit, and we talk about all these things that you should meet with and try and discuss it and everything. When it got put in a writing form, that took it, for me, that took it to a higher level. Commissioner Jacob.
I totally get the commissioner to employee, employee to commissioner, and the respectful workplace and all that. But when it comes to commissioner, I could back this up to, we weren't all always elected, but we were maybe somewhat publicly political. There would be letters to the editor, could be offensive. We're really still in a life, in my view, of 5 individuals in the community, but it feels like some commissioners are trying to use this respectful workplace policy to somehow say, I've got a way to get after so-and-so, and I can use the county attorney. And I mean, to me, that feels wrong. I mean, whether we're elected or not, we could be taking political positions. We could be writing letters to the editor. We could be at public forums saying things that would offend each other. And we wouldn't have this, these tools of personnel and all these different ways to do what's taxpayers' dollars are being wasted on this. So, so I do feel like there's a difference between elected to elected. I think it's just a civil matter, and whether we're not above or below, we're just 5 individuals within the community, and I don't really feel like it involves personnel or the county attorney or the county attorney's office. Because what if I hadn't been elected yet and I wrote a letter that offended one of these commissioners, but I was going to be elected in a year? I mean, I wouldn't be subject to any of this, right? So I don't know. I mean, Commissioner Meyer just brought up a what if, right?
Well, and so for Attorney Sonneman, you represent the board, you represent Winona County. But again, in our situation, were you representing whoever made the complaint? And would I need to hire, or going to Commissioner Myers if it came to a name, you know, a negative name attack
Hate
or
speech,
something,
let's say.
hate speech, then who would you represent, or would each commissioner or person aggrieved have to hire their own counsel?
Well, at some point,
How can you represent both, is the question, I guess.
I can't represent commissioners individually. So if there was an accusation
Right.
against a commissioner, they would have to get their own attorney. But I represent the county board and the county, and in my capacity as the county attorney, representing, we'll call it the interests of the citizens as well as the liability concerns of the county. You know, I am asked to put those letters together.
I would suggest though, and this gets to Commissioner Meyer's issue on the hate speech, for instance, that's a crime. So it wouldn't go through the respectful workplace policy. You would have to either file a complaint. I don't know where at with the
You
county
file-
attorney or
you file one
civil
with the
complaint.
police
Yeah.
department.
I thought if you were if a workplace allowed that, that the
I think it's
workplace,
both civil and criminal, but it would.
yeah, but I mean, I think that the workplace has some liability in that situation if they allow that
Well, yeah,
behavior to
because you're,
happen.
well, right, because you're a commissioner, but it doesn't mean it has to go through, because you're part of the county. So there is a liability aspect, which the county attorney could say, advise you don't do that. But it's also got the civil component. So, or, it doesn't necessarily have to go through. So you could file it and we could say, yeah, that's a problem, but we couldn't do anything about it unless the county attorney wanted to
They'll make some
prosecute that on,
recommendations.
yeah,
right.
on their own.
I think the liability really comes to is if there's a complaint made and nothing is done about it.
Yeah.
Then the onus is really, there's liability on the part of the county for ignoring it.
Yes, exactly.
So,
But I think the problem there is that if you go through the process, let's say that complaint's made, the county attorney would provide some kind of advisory memo to the county board member that was being complained about, but it wouldn't have the effect of the civil or criminal action until someone made that kind of complaint. Not to us, because we can't do anything with that. It has to be done through the proper system, law enforcement, yeah.
So this I think it all really got to a point when the newspaper reported that the land stewardship program people had contacted 3 county commissioners and devised a plan to change the process of electing the chair, because they knew it would affect a potential conditional use permit application, variance application. So in your opinion, Attorney Sonneman, because it was documented, there were emails, there were litigation and everything, that this happened and occurred, is that considered respectful workplace? I mean, I guess it personally, it bothers me that happened and that it has contributed to this. I think it has extended this conversation because it says in our behavioral ground rules.
It's been embarrassing for me.
Right, it's
Downright
been
embarrassing.
problematic. It says, where does it say that? It says, we deal, oh, no.
Embarrassing and frustrating. I'm not part of it, and I'm the one who gets the reprimand letter.
We acknowledge that we all can make mistakes and acknowledge responsibility for our mistakes by apologizing and moving on. And maybe it's just that I can't move on. I have lost, as I said when I talked at the podium back in December, I lost trust in some of our board relationships, and how do we ever get back to a position of trust? So it started with, selection of chair, and then we get into this whole Board of Adjustment, and of course we can't control those. We said we would have a discussion of the animal unit cap. That's come up several times today after the dairy census was provided to us. We've avoided all those discussions that, to me, contribute to this problem that we're discussing today. And so how do we clear some of this stuff up and move on? I don't know.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Meyer.
So I made a commitment long ago. I've said this many times. I didn't agree to talk about that topic today because we have been asked to protect the liability and the taxpayers of the county by not making public comments about an ongoing lawsuit. And I'm not going to do that today either.
It's fine. I need an update from the county attorney because I thought something was supposed to have been resolved back in early April, and we've got
Madam
no
Chair,
update.
You
Yes,
might
Commissioner
recall that I made a comment a few months ago that was about continued innuendos and statements that are being made about me in the public and to the press. And as you said, I've never been interviewed. I've never given testimony. And so those are just things that are in the paper and they're innuendos. And continued statements in public saying otherwise are hurtful and offensive to me, and they do continue this rancor on the board. And so I would just reflect back to you that you are the one keeping this going.
Because it hasn't come to a resolution. It is just ongoing. And I'm referring to a document I received that the courts had emails and had documented phone calls and conversations. So I'm not making anything up. I'm referring to court documents that I think we all received. So I'm not making anything up. Attorney Sonneman.
Madam Chair, but I think, we each have our perception of what those emails meant, and it's up to the court to decide, and the court did decide. So I would,
Right.
If you, the more that, we do continue to talk about this, the more things foment, but read the judge's decision. I would update the board. I received an email from the attorney who's representing the county. This was June 2nd, so it was last week, right?
Yes.
That the Judge Mark has not made his decision yet, and this would be on the remedy.
Okay, he has
So-
not. Okay.
And the 90-day clock is still ticking. There's about 30 days left. So it's,
Okay.
so, and yes, as much as I know it pains everybody in this room for me to say, this is not something that should be discussed while the litigation is pending. And until the judge makes that final decision, litigation is pending.
Well, it pains me greatly that we lost a significant dairy operation. And again, I wasn't interviewed and I wasn't part of that, but they left the county because of some of this, the animal unit cap and the economic viability of the dairy industry in Winona County. And that's unfortunate because that's an huge economic loss. All right, Commissioner Olson.
I guess, to sum it up, it sounds like as elected officials, and we've seen it on the national stage and playing out, that we have a right to pretty much say anything we want, but it doesn't make it right. And with that, I'd like to make a motion that we table any further discussion on the respectful workplace policy.
I'll second that for a vote. Okay, so we have a motion to table any further discussion on the respectful workplace policy. And seconded, discussion. Commissioner
Well,
Jacob.
I think we had a couple of questions there for maybe either legal or staff that would be nice to get some type of response or answer to. And I'm going to assume that tabling means probably just permanently dispose of the item to not be redredged. Is that?
I would assume that the questions we brought up today will be further clarified from administration.
Is that part of the, well, it's not part of a tabling motion. So I'm not ready to support tabling until we have a motion that,
So would you accept that as a friendly amendment, Commissioner Olson?
I will table any further discussion today pending further guidance from administration.
I guess if that is an amendment, I just made that motion.
Okay, do we have a second to the amendment?
I'll second that.
Can you do that?
I'll second, I can second
I
the
think-
amendment. Yeah.
Right, so we vote on the amendment that,
Vote on the amendment
On the
first.
amendment.
yes, the amendment is that there would be further guidance. Questions can be posed, I'm assuming, to administration for clarity of the question. In a,
Well, perhaps clarity as to why things work the way they work, and because there are certain protections that need to be respected that may apply to employees, but may not apply to elected officials, things like that. I mean, like, can the accused be given certain information? Well, it depends.
right, and that, we're in this gray area, so that'll be on gray paper when you write your opinion. That's the law interpretation. Okay, so we have the amendment. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay? Okay, the amendment passes. Now the motion is to table with further guidance from administration regarding the respectful workplace policy. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay? Okay. Table. 7.2, moving on. Discuss content of the Human Rights Commission resolution.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Meyer.
can I launch the conversation?
Yes, please.
I'll say what I've said before. My goal is really to acknowledge the validity of especially the information that's contained in this policy or resolution that was passed by the Human Rights Commission with respect to how racism plays into youth incarceration. And I take that seriously. I think that's a serious problem. I don't believe that we can actually do what the resolution asked, which is enact a zero youth incarceration policy, because I don't think we have that authority. But I would like to see us move towards less youth incarceration or minimizing youth incarceration. Our Health and Human Services Advisory Commission on their own asked if they could consider the resolution and help craft language that was in a resolution that we could approve. So what I'd like to see is for them to reach out to the Human Rights Commission and study this issue for a while and see, what language they can come up with to help us affirm the positive in the statement and do some good work with the area that's within our power, which I think is to look at what we're already doing for youth, to see what changes potentially could be made and that would be effective, to map our current processes, which is something the Juvenile Justice Committee of the CJCC has already started. But just to make that kind of a public statement that we're affirming, that we don't want to see kids in jail either.
This particular that's in our packet, page 150, this was presented to the city council initially.
Yes.
And we haven't seen any revisions or any changes. I haven't received anything.
No.
But you're right, it says at the very end in bold, enact a zero youth incarceration policy. And that's not within our control.
No.
And again, I think we discussed this last time, that there's a lot of education to go on both sides. I know a lot of work's being done as to what is the process, what could the process be, how could we handle this, and work within all the parties that are involved, but they're not, the county board doesn't say you're going to this or that facility or your discipline or anything. That's within a different, higher power. So, Commissioner Olson.
I got a question, maybe it'd be of Karen. Do we have locally a problem?
No, we don't actually. That the data that I had sent to you,
Mhm.
which was a very detailed compilation of all the juvenile arrests, or I wouldn't even call them arrests, I shouldn't use that word, but, and we should focus on the positive. We really don't have a problem. And in terms of, if there's the bias issue or yes, as a system, the court system has a racial imbalance problem, but in Winona County, it's actually juvenile males or the juvenile white males are the number one.
So we're creating a solution that for a problem that doesn't
right,
exist.
right. I would just note that the Engage Winona report just came out. If you haven't had a chance to read it. And it does address a lot of what this board can do, what we can do through our departments with CJCC and I see Karen Stannis's name up there, so in bold letters, the Department of Human Services, in terms of working together. And then we just got the sequential intercept mapping report on adults, and as Commissioner Meyer mentioned, we're looking in the Juvenile Justice Committee for CJCC at mapping the system for juveniles as well. And I think just from my review of a lot of what we're doing now, the focus is really on early intervention, prevention, a lot of crisis stabilization, and it applies to both adults and juveniles. But really, I think we should highlight the positives of what Winona County has done and is doing through the diversion programs, through restorative justice. And I know there's a differences of opinion on restorative justice shouldn't be out of the Department of Corrections. And that was a great topic of discussion at the Engage Winona listening sessions and discussions. So I think, all of us who participated, and I know everybody in this, at this table participated. So first of all, thank you for participating and, taking everything very seriously. But the positives are, yes, we have a very small proportion of children who end up in our juvenile justice system.
I think part of this group, though, one is too many.
Yes.
An attitude of
Right.
some of
No,
the, one person
yeah,
incarcerated
and-
is too many, but I agree with Commissioner Olson. Thank you for that statement. We really don't have a
Yeah,
big
no.
problem. Commissioner Kavesi.
Yeah, I think looking at what we can do is what we are already doing. It's ongoing. We have Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. We have Juvenile Justice Work Group. Under that, we have the SIM report, which touched on youth information, and we have Engage Winona, and now we have the Human Services Advisory Committee. So I think what we can do is to keep focusing on what we are doing with emphasis on early intervention and prevention and crisis stabilization, all of those early steps that do not lead to, hopefully, something more severe. And to me, that's not what this resolution says, but this is what we can do out of some of the intent of the resolution. They want to reduce youth incarceration, and we do also by emphasizing these other activities that are prevention and stabilization, family support, all of those interventions that do help and do prevent further issues. We had 2 graduations at the treatment court the other day, and I've never been to a graduation where anybody said, well, this has been fun, but see you, there's grandmothers there, there's families there with their children. There's been, realignment of families. They do get back together. We're taking people off of other family supports because now there's a working individual. They have stable apartments. They have, stable work lives. That's what we want to promote, is activities like that, which then prevent further incarceration or further activities.
So we're really not We're just discussing this resolution
Right.
and where it goes from and our
Yeah.
continued work
I mean,
in
what,
this arena.
what I would like, oh, Madam
Yes.
Chair. What I would like is to ask our Health and Human Services Advisory Committee to go ahead and take a look at this because they want to. And come back with something that was a resolution we could potentially support. I don't, even with the comments that they made at the last meeting, and I think you were there as well, I don't think that they feel like zero youth is necessarily, and you talked to the chair, right? But I think it's more of an opportunity for us to say, yeah, we don't want to incarcerate kids either. And
Right, and this
we
is what
get-
we're gonna do to
Yeah.
prevent that.
Yeah.
Yes.
so I don't, I see it as only a positive for us to affirm it as a value that is a value I think we have anyway.
Attorney Simon.
I just also want to note, part of that, their request is that the board also in the strongest possible terms reject any and all efforts to build, renovate, or in any other way support the development of a juvenile detention facility. And I think we've said it over and over again. I'll say it again. The board rejected that in terms of the replacement jail decision, because that was a topic of discussion and it was a recommendation in the jail advisory committee report. But the board has rejected that, and it's an adult-only facility. So I think it's pretty clear that the direction is not to build a juvenile detention facility. So.
I mean,
Commissioner Meyer.
and I think it might be good to say that we would prefer going forward that we use preventative measures.
Yes. That's a more
Very much so.
positive kind of
Yeah, mhm.
resolution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, two things that come to mind. It was a positive to see the city police is putting two, I'm not sure what the title is, kind of more of a social work crisis.
Embedded.
Yeah,
they're
that's,
embedding
I was
social
gonna
workers.
report on that.
Okay,
It
all
happened
right.
at the city council meeting last night.
That's positive. And then yesterday at our regional AMC meeting, the facility in Rochester is close to opening the crisis invented.
The Crest facility.
Yeah, I don't know the exact name of it, but it's close to being ready to open with multiple counties sharing in that. Problem is you got to get to Rochester. You know,
45
and we
minutes
talked
away.
about transportation. We talked about the issue of transportation in all of Southeast Minnesota. And the problem is you got to get to Rochester to use it.
Yeah.
Commissioner Meyer.
Yeah, and I had a conversation with Ms. Samus about this need for crisis beds and detox. And my question was, well, will that facility solve our problems? And her answer was, I'm not sure. Yeah, so I think TBD, I think that's still an
Right.
issue that has come out of the SIM report that I am,
What did you just say? You used some initials.
SIM, the
No,
sequential intercept mapping.
To be determined.
To
To be
be
determined.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just, I
Sorry.
guess I was just mumbling.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's one of the things that really, I think, came out of the SIM.
It did,
Yeah.
right.
Yes, very strongly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
as
the
like the
number
top
one.
three
was saying,
things.
yeah. Couldn't
All
put
right,
it
so
any
I think
stronger.
we've got clarity. I don't know that we need do we need a motion or anything? I think there's multiple groups working on this concept and
So,
pieces are coming together.
I mean, I guess I could make a motion that we ask Health and Human Services Advisory to go ahead and work on it. But can they go ahead and work on it without that? I mean, what do you guys?
I think they can. They're I would say they can. It's an advisory group.
Okay.
Okay, everybody comfortable with that?
Well,
All right.
I mean, I think it's always better when you take affirmative
Affirm action
rather
and ask them to,
than just kind of leaving it out there.
all right,
So I
so
also move.
that, what, Health and Human Services work on a
Resolution.
resolution, all right,
Yeah, I would second that.
all right. Any other discussion?
I would just ask, so that we don't silo,
Exactly.
that they include people from our juvenile justice system, restorative justice, as well as the juvenile justice members of my office as well. So I think we all get to the table and talk about it.
And Madam Chair, this is Karen Sanis. I would also like to include our truancy work within that. I think we do a good job as far as, truancy, juvenile justice, things like that, but there is always room for improvement. And we need to do a continuous quality improvement. And I think we need to include all of those juvenile systems. One thing that I want to discuss is a reduction overall in the use of out-of-home placements for children in truancy. So that is something that I want to see happen, and a reduction overall in out-of-home placements from a trauma-informed lens. Children being placed out of home is very traumatic. And so I want to see it's a very traumatic event in their lives, and we want to reduce that as much as possible. It's not just children in the child welfare system that it's traumatic for, it's all children. So we need to take a serious look at that and reduce that, using the 7-day truancy program or the 30-day truancy program over at Von Wald Shelter to assure child is getting education, I don't feel is appropriate. So I want to be able to look at alternatives and do prevention and early intervention services around those. We also have to look at,
Looking for the dog.
sorry, my dog wants to go outside. We also have to look at our Families First Prevention and Services Act, and including those children involved in our juvenile justice system and our truancy program to assure that they are afforded the Title 40 protections within that. We will be talking about that tonight at this evening at our Health and Human Services Advisory Committee too. So I want to include all children's services underneath that. So thank you.
I'm sure, sorry,
Yes,
continue
Attorney
adding, but, and I know Karen's aware of this, or Ms. Sanis is aware of this, but we should also include the school systems.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
One thing that, as again, comes out of the Engage Winona is I think there's a lack of understanding of what systems exist now and how we work together with the schools already. And we already have a truancy diversion program and a truancy court, things like that, but it's important to include the schools, the public and the private schools. So, and I know Superintendent Freiheit is very interested in this because she indicated through one of her school board members, who happens to be my husband, that she wanted to talk to me about truancy. So there you go.
I don't have data, but there's been comments made that some of our outlying school districts don't seem to have as much of a problem with truancy as Winona 861. So somebody's doing it better than.
Right, and that's what I mean, including all the
Yep, we need
the
to,
school
what
districts.
works. Yeah.
St. Charles, Lewiston, and our smaller private, as well as Cotter and.
Right. Okay.
Tucker is not a problem at all in my Amish schools.
That's right. You're absolutely right.
Now you see why I asked for a formal vote.
Okay, so
We need to amend
Yeah.
this for all this stuff, or
I-
can we say that Health and Human Services
We
has
can-
a latitude to involve the
Jacob.
additional group?
I'm considering just voting against it because we were asked to support this and the motion didn't come forward to do that. And I think that's okay. And I feel like any motion that we make is just kind of pigeonholing the people who are going to work on this into some directive to come. We're only asking for a resolution because we want to do a different resolution than what someone else asked for. I think the work that's being done is good and we shouldn't prohibit them or steer them. I'm happy with what they're doing. And so I feel like this vote is really a vote of not supporting this other motion, which we don't need to have a motion to do.
I think it's an ongoing issue. I think we got a lot of partners working on it. In a way, I don't know that a resolution is going to change anything because I think the work is getting done regardless of.
Good
the
work is
resolution.
being done internally.
Yeah.
I think just from my perspective, one of the reasons that I asked for that was there is a lot of work going on. There's a lot of good work. And I just want to make sure that it's coordinated rather than, as Karen pointed out, in silos. And I think having the board affirmatively say that I want these groups to work together and come to the table, whether it's to create a resolution or it's to continue to work on these issues, it kind of serves the same purpose. In order to do the resolution, they kind of have to work out those issues. And especially because as Commissioner Kvesky mentioned, it wasn't just the resolution, it was also what are we going to do about it? So it's kind of dovetails into this overall engage Winona listening and what are we going to do after the fact? And I'd rather see the board kind of say, get together and do this rather than
But then
each individual group kind of going out there and then whatever comes back, you know? So that's why I mentioned that.
The only reservation I have is, I don't know if, are we, by doing this, are we saying Health and Human Services is the driver of all this? Because there's so much that's beyond our control. I mean, should they be setting the standards, or
No, I
should
think,
the law
I think
enforcement, the
one,
courts?
and again, I
How do we,
didn't mean to cut you off.
yeah, that's all right.
I have a habit of that, jumping in too soon.
That's okay.
I think that's the way it kind of, I mean,
Sure.
that's why it kind of started out. Well, the HHS advisory committee was working on this already, kind of wanted to work on it. And then so by making it more formal, you can see everybody says, well, we have to be at the table. And so I think by affirmatively voting on that bigger kind of idea, you're really saying, okay, everybody has to be at the table. It's not just HHS.
Okay.
But I think it's important that HHS advisory committee works on this as maybe the core, just because there's Title 4E money, and that'll become apparent this afternoon about how that structure is. But it's also important that obviously juvenile justice be at the table and the WAPs be at the table and all that too. So it's a big issue, and I think it would be helpful if the board kind of did weigh in on the direction we're going from time to time.
Commissioner Kvesi.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that one of the reasons why I think we should do this is to make clarifications to the public about what is happening and how it's working, how we're working together, all of those kinds of things, because in the Engage Winona report, that was one of the issues, that there is a lack of information about how to interact with the system, when, what does the system do and provide, and all of that kind of stuff. So for that reason, I'm obviously in support of the motion. So
Jacob.
I get wanting a formal process in place, and maybe I can still support this. It just felt like we started with one focus, and then we just kept, we were losing. I felt like the motion really lost a lot of focus, and it became whatever the opposite of streamlined is, and I didn't really know what we were voting on.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I think, again, that's why I kind of asked that it be formal, because with the board just saying, yeah, it's a good idea, it's kind of everybody works on their own agenda then, which is, all going in the right direction, but they're not necessarily going in the same direction. So then I think, yeah, it evolved from that, and you can see it's more complicated, but it really does tie into this response to the Engage Winona listening sessions, and it brings everybody to the table. And then it's the board publicly is saying, yeah, we want to do something. The resolution is just a representation of that eventually, where we get to what we can do, what we can support, and that'll come back to the board.
It's almost like a vision statement.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Okay. So
Right.
I'm going to need to hear the motion restated. 'Cause I don't know.
I'm gonna leave that up to Chris.
I don't know if I can.
I don't think that okay, so, all right, I'm going to try. We'll take a step. Yeah, we're starting with Health and Human Services, that they take this up as an issue, but they will also involve the other entities and institutions that need to be involved, which include, and I'm not limiting it to this because I don't know that I think of all of them, but the different school districts, the commissions or parts of the CJCC that deal with this, the truancy folks, who else?
Juvenile justice
Yeah, the Juvenile Justice Committee? Yeah.
committee, which covers truancy too. but, yeah.
And I think if they discover that there are other resources through the process that need to be involved, that they have the latitude to, to do that.
that's my understanding as the
Okay.
second also.
All right.
Yeah,
Is that
I understand what you're saying, but I didn't really hear a very clear motion.
And the ultimate goal is to really help us provide information about what we're doing, better understand what it is that we're doing, where the gaps are, and then potentially what ideas would be proposed. And if there were any ideas, I think that would ultimately come back to us, if that was appropriate. And if it is things that staff can do on their own, I mean, I think they have the latitude to do that, right?
Well, I mean, some of the things that through the juvenile justice system, working with Department of Corrections, working with, like I said, restorative justice, which is part of corrections. Sorry, there's just so many things. The Engage Winona report is good about kind of identifying, taking some of that stuff. And that's why I like the idea of this being with Health and Human Services, because that was one of the criticisms, that there was too much criminality.
Yep.
And so if there's a focus point that Health and Human Services Advisory Board, which is really the community, I'd like to see some lived experience people there. That would be juveniles, but that's probably beyond it. But at this point, I mean, but that would be one of the recommendations. But basically bringing to the table all the stakeholders, and rather than spinning our wheels in different groups. But we're not really spinning wheels, but I could go on and on, sorry.
Yeah, but it seems to me that it's important that this be a mapping of what exists and what gaps are. And so that we can make any changes or interventions be effective, right? They need to actually address a problem, and if there's any cost involved, that's up to us.
Commissioner Jacob.
Is this at all time sensitive if we ask to table it and have staff bring something forward to us next meeting that we could vote on? Because it still seems really unfocused to me.
Yeah, I mean, it would give the groups time to talk about what they could do together. I mean, I'm always for collaboration because there's so many different groups, and a lot of people are on the same committees, so, but I think Health and Human Services Advisory Board is trying to take the lead as well. They probably should, because of the early intervention, the prevention, the crisis intervention. And I think that was the message from the Engage Winona listening sessions, as well as our SIM mapping, that there needs to be more done up front at what's called the 0 or -1 intercept, if you want to get real technical.
Okay, so with
A proposed motion?
work,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
kind of a guidance or a work.
Well, it's something the
outline.
board could adopt it if they want to edit it and change
Right,
it at the next
okay.
meeting or something
So
like that. Yeah.
You want to withdraw your motion
Okay, yeah, withdraw my motion.
and withdraw the second? Commissioner Kavesi?
I don't really see a need to do this, but I don't see a problem with it either, so.
Okay, all right. So
So then, can I, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Can I make a motion that we ask staff to pull together some language to clarify this a little further and bring it back to us at our next meeting?
next meeting or
When it's done,
Soon,
yeah,
yeah.
whenever.
Soon.
I don't
Okay.
know, I don't think there's any time sensitivity.
Staff includes Human Services
Yeah.
Advisory.
Right.
Well, it's staff and the committees.
Okay, so we have a motion that staff bring some
second it.
clarity to the process and the partners and maybe a real rough plan or
Yeah.
something, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so again, we're as clear as the
Well, I
whole
think some of
criminal
that's
justice
in the
system is.
Engage Winona report, so.
Now that is out, did it just come out?
About Friday.
I thought that was a draft.
Yeah, it was a kind of preview draft.
We need to
but then-
approve that?
No.
My
Well,
guess is he'll do a form, when it's finalized. he'll-
Yeah, but I think that was like in the next week, wasn't it? or something?
okay,
It
so
was,
let's
yeah.
go back to the motion. All those in favor say aye.
I-
Right.
Aye. Opposed, nay? Okay, all right, we got the motion.
Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Kavesi, you had a announcement or?
Yeah, the city council meeting last night for the city of Winona formalized their discussion that's been ongoing for these alternative response teams, is what they're called. ART people, I think they may be known as, I'm not sure. And also the Hiawatha Valley Mental Health Board voted yesterday to go forward under the guidance, assuming or when the city council acted to make it official. So the two organizations are working in partnership. Hiawatha Valley will be hiring 2 alternative response team members. They will be working, they're emphasizing the 3 to 11 hour shift. And they will be working, I believe, Monday through Friday It's going to be a work in progress. There are provisions for public safety involved, and they may go out with police, they may go out without police, depending on the circumstances. But it's going to work between the dispatch center and the city police and these new alternative response team members who are employees of Hiawatha Valley Mental Health.
So question, do statistics show that Monday is a bad crime day? I mean, 11 to 3, I can see the hours, but are like Monday and
3 to
Tuesday
11.
bad days, or should they be there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday?
Well,
where's
it's a
the
work in
statistics?
progress. I'm
Okay.
sure they've discussed all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a comment that,
No,
you
you're
know,
right, but
Yeah, we have most of our in custodies on Monday mornings, so.
yeah, so that happened over the weekend, but that's something that could be shared. Okay.
yeah,
all
and the
right.
goal is to align people with preventative services in the community to address the situation rather than let it evolve into any criminal activity. So they wanted to intervene.
Good, positive step. Okay, anything else? No? All right, 2 things that happened yesterday. We had our District 9 Association of Minnesota Counties meeting, and it was first in-person meeting in, I think, like 14 or 16 months or something, and it was quite well attended. It was over in Lanesboro. And 2 things, a lot of discussion about the American Rescue Plan Act, all this money that's coming into, and how, and it'll be 2 different payments, and how do we make the best use of the money in both short-term and long-term? And the question is that, you know, are we going to get all the money, or would politics change the flow of the money? And a lot of, again, a lot of gray areas as to what you can spend the money on, what is infrastructure, what isn't infrastructure. But anyway, and I don't know, each county got one of these. It's off the NACO website. It's a kind of a checklist of what they've come up with. And Ken, I will give this to you. I haven't read it. I just got it handed to me. But the NACO, National Association of Counties, is really working on trying to bring some clarity to this whole, you know, how do we spend all this money and spend it wisely? So that's something that I know Ken's working on a plan.
Can you send that out to us, Ken?
Yeah, you could
That
probably,
you mean?
yeah, because it's kind of hidden on the NACO website. They said you got to go to a couple different links to get it.
I
Yes.
would add, LMC and AMC did a joint, it's like an hour and 15 minutes webinar.
Couple
Or
weeks
so.
ago, yeah.
I can certainly send Ken the link to that. They had the person from the Minnesota Office of Management and Budget who will be, that was doing interpretation.
Mhm.
And I found it very helpful in terms of explanation. I mean, Micah gave us a 6-page summary, which, okay, that was good considering but this 1-hour webinar was actually very informative and pretty easy to understand.
Okay.
I can give that to Ken and he can
Can
send it
send it
out as well.
Okay, all right. And one other thing that I personally think that we should do, the Association of Minnesota County Board of Directors passed a resolution, and it's kind of thanking all the dedication and commitment to the public service excellence of county staff during COVID-19, the pandemic, and it does ask that the governor and lieutenant governor proclaim a day of statewide special recognition for county workers. So I will give this to Ken, and maybe we can discuss this and also pass the resolution for our county workers, because I keep hearing Ben Klinger on the news and everything, doing an excellent job. Now his thing is to stay hydrated. Get your shot and stay hydrated. But everybody at that meeting felt their county public health staff has done exemplary work with the COVID situation. So I will pass that on to Ken too. Anything else to come before the Winona County Board at this time? Not?
Motion to adjourn.
All right.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Olson, seconded by Commissioner Jacob to adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We're adjourned. Thank you.